So in today's video, I want to do a walkthrough of some targets that you might want to consider imaging during the month of May up in the night sky. Now, I'm going to jump right into Stellarium, but there's other programs that you can use, like on your iPhone or whatnot, that you can obviously use to follow along, but ideally you want to use a Telrad indicator just so you can figure out size, etc. But I also do have some presets in Stellarium for my scopes in particular, to give you an idea of scaling and framing. So let's jump into it. So here we have the night sky in the start of May. Now this is at the starting of the evening. Fortunately for us, the moon is only going to be coming up later and later and later as we're moving farther away from full moon towards a new moon. Now there's a lot of fun targets that are still available for galaxy season up in the sky. Particularly, while it's not a galaxy, we do have the Beehive cluster in Cancer is a fun and easy one to image. Moving over to Leo, we still have a lot of galaxies in Leo, including this giant grouping over here, but also the famous Leo triplet, which you can find here. And if you're wondering what this red square is, the red square indicates what I can see through the Red Cat 51 at 250 millimeters with a full frame sensor, which is generally what I use to find targets the first time I'm imaging them. Now, while the Red Cat isn't ideal for galaxies and star clusters, as we'll move slowly over here, there we go, such as the Great Hercules cluster, you're going to want to stick in the early evenings to a more aggressive lens, which would be something like the Edge HD. As you can see here, the square is now much smaller, and this represents 2000 millimeters of focal distance. And it's perfect for framing targets such as Great Star Cluster in Hercules. Another star cluster that's a good one to take while you're over here is M92. As we zoom in here, it's not as big or as bright as Hercules star cluster, but it's still a very interesting little star cluster. Finally, another one that I think is worthwhile for people to image, especially this time of year, although as it goes on it's going to get better, is the Iris Nebula. That's a fun one as well. Now you'll note that I'm mainly focused on imaging about 30 degrees up in the air, because as the night goes on, and we'll just forward it a bit here, you'll see that these are actually rising targets on the east side. Once we sort of get into early morning or late night at 2 a.m. in the morning, a lot of larger night sky objects rise. Now, Cassiopeia is still pretty low, and during the whole May, it's not going to really pop up until near the end, but Cygnus is actually a really good spot to go for a bunch of different targets. So, near Deneb, we have the North American and Pelican nebulas that are located right here. While they are generally pretty faint, you can actually image quite a bit, and they will start to pop up against the background. Another fun target is actually the center of Cygnus itself. There are a lot of fun little targets, like the Inchworm cluster, I don't know, just sort of the Cygnus nebulosity here, and also the Crescent Nebula. Now, the Crescent Nebula is a good target for the Red Cat if you're just beginning, or if you happen to have a medium-sized scope, it also works quite well, but the Edge HD really does frame it. So if you can get up to 1800 or 2000 millimeters of focal length, this is definitely a target to consider at this time of year to use as a practice target. Now, I've actually imaged the Crescent Nebula before, but I was still at that time trying to work out my OAG, so I got this image. It's not the greatest, but I'm hoping to go back and redo it. Moving back towards the south, we can see here that the Sagittarius cluster is starting to come up. Now, there's a lot of fun targets here, such as the Eagle Nebula, which is famous for the pillars of life. You have the Omega Nebula, which is just a big giant nebula that looks absolutely amazing. And you have the Trifid Nebula, which of course isn't going to show up here. Is it going to go? There we go. Trifid Nebula. Boom. There you go. And then you have a bit lower in the sky, the Trifid Nebula and the Lagoon Nebula. So This area here above the Sagittarius cluster is actually a very popular target. And as you can sort of see here, the moon is coming up and it's going to cause a bit of mooniness during the first part of the month. But generally, I would say that for most of the month, we're not going to really need to worry about the moon very much. A fun target, though, is the Blue Horse Nebula, and I've tried for this guy. This guy is quite faint, and definitely if you have a monochrome camera, it's worth going after. If you're shooting one-shot color, still worth it, but you're only going to be really collecting blue in this region. Green and red aren't really that available, so it's a little bit different than what you're normally used to shooting. And yes, you're definitely going to want to shoot with a wide lens, because while this shows the Blue Horse Nebula framing quite nicely, there's actually quite a bit of luminosity in this region to really capture the whole thing. So in conclusion, the night sky in May starts to look really good for low-level galaxy imagery. It's important to note that if you want to do some really dark sky imagery, you're still sort of in galaxy season if you're looking straight up. However, as the nights go on, this is a run through of the 15th, you can start to see that a lot of targets become available if you're up in North America. Now, if you're a little more southern, you will get a little bit better southern sky imagery, but that gives you an idea of what you're looking at. Jupiter and Saturn are available in the early morning, but I would say you probably want to wait another month or two before you start to consider imaging those. So that's the night sky in May. So I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough. I realize that for some hardcore imagers, they're probably thinking you should be pointing your telescope straight up, which obviously is a great idea, but for a lot of beginners, which is what my channel tends to focus on, pointing scopes straight up can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're trying to find objects. So I'm more focused on the targets that are new, coming up, and are going to be ones that, you know, beginners are going to be able to find pointing at about 30-45 degrees angle. For me, I'm going to be focused mainly on the Crescent Nebula, and then I'm going to be switching over a bit later to my Red Cat and be testing a bunch of filters. These filters are a little bit crazy, so if you have a target in mind, please let me know. Otherwise, you will end up with a North American nebula again. So thanks for watching. Please leave any comments, likes below, and if you enjoyed this immensely and thought this is absolutely the most invaluable thing you've ever heard of, clearly just hit the subscribe button and the bell notification, anything else that YouTube asks you. It really does help my channel grow when people join. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.